Welcome to Saturday versus Sunday. I'm Jon Barban. With me is Jeff Dover, and let's talk football.
All right, we have a very Notre Dame specific episode today, in case you couldn't guess by our shirts. And that's because there was some talk online about their strength of schedule. Like, is it good? Is it bad? Some people, it seems like it's quite divisive out there. So it's a good thing to talk about. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, yeah, it's always the controversy with them because they can choose their own schedule and they're not bound by a conference, obviously. And some of the traditional games they used to play kind of aren't there anymore, but the USC game is. But that used to be a power game, but not necessarily anymore, like a game that would boost their strength of schedule. So I'm just going to pull their schedule up so we can look at it and then discuss, is this a schedule that would be on par with or merit the same type of I don't know what you would call it, accolade or sort of
so
power as like a Florida schedule, right, or Ohio State or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. It's not as, there's no way, like the SEC stuff is so strong, like the schedules and everything like that is.
Yeah.
It's not really about that. It's not really comparing it to like that out of conference stuff. Where it's important is that at the end of the season, can it hurt them? Right? If you play the challenge with the poor strength of schedule, if you only have one or two good teams, is that if you lose to one of them and you beat the rest of the bad teams, that one loss is going to hurt you more, versus something like in the SEC where like you play a ranked team often. And so then losing to a ranked team once, but you beat three others, then it's not going to hurt you as much, right? So that's the main thing about the strength of schedule. All right, so let's take a look at it here.
Yeah. So opening with Miami at Miami.
Yeah.
And then that could be, let's just go game by game here.
Sure.
That could be a playoff caliber team, or it could be 6-6. Miami's complete wild card. It always is a wild card, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, they've got Carson back in this year. They were sort of, they were really good last year. They fell flat just in a couple of games. They were 10-3 last year. And so I think 10 wins is reasonable to think for them this year again, because what they have coming back and how much talent they put in there. So I think that is a big time matchup.
I think so too. I think I think they should challenge for the ACC, as long as Carson Beck doesn't feel like throwing the ball to the other team every game the way he did last year. But that should be a bringing up the strength of this schedule, right? The Miami game right out of the gates.
I'll be
surprised
at the end of the season if they're like, like that loss to Miami hurts if Miami ends up like 7-5 or something.
You would hope Cristobal's game time gaffes, game management gaffes are kind of, he got them out of his system by now.
That is the worst too.
God, that's the wild card there. He could blow it in any game just from really the way he decides to manage it.
I've forgotten about that. And
So anyways, we're going to assume that's a plus for our strength of schedule, right?
Yeah.
And that's potentially a playoff team.
Yes.
You could, that's a reasonable thing to say. Okay. Next, at home against Texas A&M. I don't know what to make of Texas A&M. They're supposed to have all the talent in the world. They're supposed to be able to put it together, and so far they haven't. But you'd have to say that beating them's a strong win too.
Yeah, I think that Texas A&M is also in the playoff consideration for a team going into. They were 8-5 last year. They controlled their own destiny. They had a couple of squirrely games like with LSU, and they lost a couple near the end, which they shouldn't have. But like that is a team that is going to be a really good team in the SEC this year.
Yep.
So
that's, I would say, another one that breaks
potential
up the
playoff
team schedule. Yeah, and I know that they all have their FPI ratings, and everyone's going to argue, oh, it's ranked whatever. It's just not. We don't know that. We don't know what these teams are going to be this year. My guess is those are two strong teams this year.
Two very strong teams out of the gate,
as opposed to Purdue, which is one of the worst teams in the FBS. That's doing nothing besides bringing down the strength of the schedule.
Yeah, the worst team in the Big Ten, only scored 189 points last year. Just to put in perspective, Ohio State scored 571.
That's
So
pretty bad.
that's really bad. They're 100 points worse on their defense compared to the next worst team in the division. So yeah, really bad. But again, like a lot of teams, the Big Ten playing them too. So
Yeah. You know what the other interesting thing about this schedule is? That's the weakest, I would say, team on the whole schedule, probably even weaker than Stanford. And they
yes,
don't actually have, I mean, the only non-power conference, oh yeah, they got Navy, but the only other non-power conference team here is Boise, but that's a strong team.
good team. Yeah,
So as a group of whatever it is, group of five, whatever they call it now, but they don't have any what you'd call cupcake games here.
no,
Like
that's
even their
Purdue
weakest,
is it.
yeah, and that's still a Big Ten team,
Yeah.
even though they're not good.
No, we were talking
So
about
yeah,
one of our last episodes. We talked about UNC and what their schedule is. They play Charlotte at one point. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
yeah.
that. There's a lot of teams have, the who else was someone else had Richmond. I think
Yeah,
maybe that
yeah.
was UNC too, right?
All of these, all
Yeah.
of those other
So
teams
like
have like
that. So
walkover
it's
games. Yeah.
just because you have a poor team on the schedule that's
Yeah.
that's not the rate limiting thing. But yeah, but Purdue's pretty bad.
All right. Next at Arkansas.
Yeah, that's not an easy game. Like
No,
that's
no, it's a middle of a road SEC team.
it's 9 a.m. Is that going to be a Europe thing? Or that's
No,
your time, eh? So
no.
that's noon kickoff Eastern. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So so Arkansas. They were 7-6 last year. That's at Arkansas. That's a good game.
Yeah.
That's not a weak game.
Then versus Boise at home.
Boise, good team. Like
Good
it's
team.
again.
Don't
it's
have Genty, but always a good team.
Yeah, gonna be a good team. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. NC State at home. Not a great team.
No, but I mean,
it's kind of just a average game. Like they better win. Like that would be a tragedy if they lost that game. That'd be a big problem.
NC State was 3-5 in conference last year, 6-7 overall. They underperformed. So I think they're better than that, but that's not a, here's another way of looking at this is because last year, and we commented on this on a couple times in our podcast, that loss to Northern Illinois really stood out, right? And people kept bringing it up throughout the whole season and in the playoffs, even when they were matched up, going into playing well in the playoffs. I don't think there's anyone on the schedule this year like a Northern Illinois. Like I don't even, Purdue maybe might be in that category, but if they lost to any of these other teams, it's not as bad as that. So like to me,
Purdue would be equally bad.
Yeah, Purdue maybe, but that's it though. Like that there no one else if they lost any other team here, it's not as devastating as that one would have been.
Yeah, and the Navy game, I would say they're just unique. They're just
Navy won like 10 games.
No, but I'm just saying, like given the talent that Navy's limited with the talent they can get, but they do run kind of a unique offense. So you're not used to playing against a team like that.
That's not a bad matchup either. No. Yeah. So just to finish off, NC State not that good. USC should be better. Like that,
could be a playoff team. We don't know, but could be a playoff.
They'll be better than they were last year. They'll have more than 6 wins. At Boston College is probably next to Purdue, might be one of the easier games I think in the schedule, just because of who Boston College has lost, and I don't know what they're going to be like this year. That's a real coin flip there. It was and it's not like at Boston College is a terrible place.
Right.
Like it's not a house of horrors to play or whatever. But no, Navy's not bad. At Pitt's always a tough game, I think, for many people.
Mm-hmm.
Syracuse won 10 games last year. At Stanford, not super challenging. So probably next to Purdue in terms of
to be completely generous and charitable, I can make an argument there's 4 playoff teams on this schedule. Yeah. You could say Miami. There is a way that the season goes this coming year where Miami gets in, Texas A&M gets in, Boise gets in as one of the group of 5 representatives, and USC also gets in. That's that's not out of the realm of possibility.
No.
So if that happens, you'd say they have 4 playoff teams on their schedule.
Yeah, and I would argue that Syracuse also had 10 wins last year and has a really good team coming back.
But they don't have McCord.
I know that, but they're expected. They've got 2 transfers. They had Angeli, like the guy from Notre Dame, and they've got someone else that came in for the guy from Liberty, was it? Or I might be getting the teams confused. But they were I just listened to that Cover 3, the summer school thing. So like the Syracuse is expected to be good this year.
Yeah.
So they're, not completely out of it in terms of an ACC championship. I don't think that way. So yeah. So no, I think you're exactly right. I don't know I think people have a hard time wrapping their head around just how jumbled up the schedule feels. Like when you're being at Florida for a while, like you get used to the rhythm of the schedule. Like it's Tennessee and Florida State and LSU, like then it's regular, in Auburn one year, not Auburn next year, Auburn the year after that. So you get used to like a regular feel to it. And Notre Dame in the last couple of years has felt pretty different because of their affiliation or who they've played.
That deal with the ACC where they have to play a certain number of ACC games. So that's why they have Stanford, Syracuse, Pittsburgh, Boston College. That's why it looks that way. But then when they apparently the USC game's going away, which sucks. But then the A&M the A&M game is like, okay, they went out of their way to put an SEC team in here. So I think, okay, so to be charitable, it's possible if it all breaks a certain direction that there's 4 playoff teams on the schedule. But if you want to go the other direction, it's possible there are no playoff teams on the schedule, and it's possible by the end of the year, none of these teams are in the top 25.
That is possible too.
So I don't think you could say the same about, let's move on to Florida as
hold on a second. So let's just finish up on the Notre Dame thing. Just looking back at last year's schedule, like going into the season, right? So at Texas A&M was a big one in the schedule. Then they had the Northern Illinois, at Purdue, which they won 66-7, Miami of Ohio, Louisville, which we weren't sure at the time how they were going to end up, Stanford, Georgia Tech, then Navy, Florida State, who was terrible, right? So
but
that
you would have without knowing
going in
the disaster of FSU, that would have been a top 25 game, if not a top 10 game.
Right. Virginia, Army, and then USC. Right. So
this is tougher than that. It sounds like
that was going to be my point. It does seem better than last year's, and last year's was enough for them to make it the playoffs. So
we'll see. I could see it being completely two ways: either 4 playoff teams or nobody in the top 25. So I think for the detractors here, to finish off the Notre Dame point, I think the absence of what you would call an obvious preseason playoff favorite to make the playoffs is missing on this. Even though there's 4 teams that could make the playoffs, no one would argue Miami, A&M, Boise, or USC are a lock for the playoffs. But if there was, I don't know, Penn State or
Texas, Georgia, or Ohio
Oregon
State
or something like that on this schedule, you'd be like, okay, so they're playing against a legitimate preseason national title contenders right there on their schedule. It's missing here. Even if any of these teams are playoff teams, no one argues any of these teams, even if they make the playoffs, are going to the title. Like that would be a completely improbable run if anyone on this schedule goes that far.
And last year they would have thought, we got Florida State, that's going to be the biggest game of the year, right? That's what they would have thought at the beginning of the season, right?
So that's where I can see people saying the schedule's not strong enough, because like where's the Texas, where's the Georgia on this schedule?
But there's just so many other teams that are like
not
that,
everyone's like that, and so, but then now we're going to present the Florida schedule, and show you what people think is potentially the toughest schedule in the country. Long Island University, notwithstanding.
That's
the one break they get. Now South Florida, okay, it's not that strong of a team. They better win that. They're in big trouble if they lose that one. Then it just gets really hard, really fast at LSU, at Miami.
That's a tough game.
That's super tough back-to-back, assuming Miami is legitimate. And then a home at Texas, at least they get them at home. But that's one of the preseason favorites to win the national championship right there. Yeah. And LSU, I don't think they're a favorite to win the national championship, but they're definitely in the
Nussmeier
list.
And they've got
Nussmeier's coming back, and
I'd like to play like Texas early so you get Arch Manning still like early in the part, right?
October 4th's not that bad. Yeah,
I know, but in same sort of like that would have been better for Tennessee too, I think, because they're going to have a new QB. Like I would have preferred to have played them early, because that's harder to have that later in the schedule. Same thing with Florida State.
Then so Texas at home, at A&M,
That's tough.
That's going to be tough. Mississippi at home, then Georgia at
Which is
the cocktail party game. So, well, that's actually going to be in Mercedes-Benz this year. It's not even going to be in Jacksonville this year.
Really?
Yeah.
When are they? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
So then Kentucky, fine. Ole Miss expected to be within the mix of
Kentucky. That's
no, I know that's tough. That's tough.
It's not nothing, but it's
and then at Ole Miss.
That's a tough game.
So the Georgia game's not actually a home game. So that's kind of 3 road games in a row.
Yes.
And then Tennessee at home, Florida State at home.
Yeah, really
Ironically,
tough.
the Florida State game looks like one of the easier games on the schedule, which normally it's not. And then Tennessee, we don't know what we're getting with the new quarterback Aguilar.
Florida State's going to be a tough game because they've got Gus Malzahn as the offensive coordinator, and they got the Boston College QB, the Castellanos, who's like a really good running QB, and so I feel like that's a perfect fit for them. And early in the season, they might not have everything together, but it'll be better near the end of the season. So that one I'm worried about, because that's always a tough, that is a tough, when that offense is humming, that's really tough.
You could say that if Castellano is going to work there, they're going to get them at the time that, as long as as long as he doesn't get injured, that's when they're going to have it sorted out.
Same with Tennessee. It would have been, that's going to be there because it's the Cal guy, or who is it? No, it was the guy from
Appalachian State.
That's right.
Well, we're assuming he's going to win the job.
It's like, that'll be, again, he's not going to be, he'll be like 8 games in or 10 games in at that point, like that they're so,
And the guy taking over at Ole Miss is supposed to be good. So it's obviously a gauntlet compared to the Notre Dame schedule. So then if you're going to actually directly compare Notre Dame's schedule to this, and I guess the other thing to say here is everyone just assumes Notre Dame's going to start the season ranked really high and stay up there.
Yeah.
And then Florida, wherever they start the season, ranked
super high. But
not ranked as high as Notre Dame, but Florida's got multiple chances to prove themselves, like versus LSU, versus Texas, versus Georgia. Whereas, not even accounting for these other games. Whereas Notre Dame, like, where's the Texas game? Where's the Georgia game? Where are these powerhouse teams that they have to overcome to prove they deserve the rank they're going to start with? Which is the other argument against Notre Dame, is they get parked there at the top. They don't really have to overcome another top team to stay there. Whereas Florida, but the thing is, Oklahoma's facing a schedule just like this. Half of the SEC teams are just stuck playing against each other. All of their schedules look like this tough, where the average fan could make the argument, oh yeah, all of these schedules are going to be tougher than Notre Dame's.
Yeah, it was. And so to finish the comparison to Notre Dame, like the Miami and Texas A&M are for sure Notre Dame's hardest tests on their schedule. And for Florida, I don't know if they make the top 3, because I would say that
not at all.
The Georgia, Texas, and at LSU are probably all worse. And I'd even throw Tennessee might even be in there, but at least the Georgia and Texas at LSU. So it's what the Notre Dame's 1 and 2 games are Florida's 4 and 5 games,
or 3 and 4 and 5. Yeah.
4 and 5.
Assuming preseason, assuming all of this breaks, how you kind of guess these teams are going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all this is you have to take with a grain of salt. Like if Arch Manning gets injured, all of a sudden that's really different. Same thing with Gunnar Stockton. So, but it's, or if Carson Beck's elbow blows up, right? So it's,
I mean, again,
a lot of stuff can change, it's right now, that's, that's why it'd be okay for Florida to lose a couple of games, because if they win, they're going to have several quality wins still on the schedule, which means something. So, but I don't think Notre Dame's schedule is as bad as people thought it was. Like that, I don't think it's I've seen weak schedules before, and that one doesn't feel as bad as some of the others.
So. I think it just bugs people because they know they're going to be ranked high, and there's no obvious other really challenging game that's going to be a top 5, maybe not even a top 10 game that's going to justify their ranking. They're likely just going to maintain all season long, unless they drop 2 or 3 games really badly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's funny. I was thinking about this, like when we were talking about like NFL playoffs. Nobody cares what strength of schedule in the NFL. As long as you get to the playoffs, that's all that matters. And now that college has a playoff, I think we're going to slowly have to start thinking of it in those terms, even though there's the other debate that it still comes down to a committee putting you in. And again, then it just reintroduces the strength of schedule argument all over again. And until it becomes an earn your way in with play in games. So like a conference game plays you in, but then like number 2 and 3 in the conference have play in game unless that happens, we're never going to get away from this. Oh, your schedule isn't strong enough. Oh, the committee's just placing you in the playoffs. Like that's going to always happen. But at least now there's enough teams that get in that it at least diminishes the strength of schedule thing during the regular season a little bit, because you still have to prove it in the playoffs and you still have to win whatever it is, 4 games.
Yeah, that was all. Everyone was so worried when the playoff, when it was going to be expanded and stuff, that it would take away from the regular season, which is what it's really, college football separates itself from a lot of other sports with the importance of the regular season. And just because it's like you said, it's like the NFL in terms of there's not that many games. So the Ohio State Michigan game is always going to be big. The Florida LSU game, the Bama Georgia game is always going to be big. Bama LSU, like those, just because there's one a year, like it's that's it. Where it's not like in the NBA or the NHL where you could make a case where it's like really doesn't matter. Like it's
or
only
baseball.
It only starts when you get in the playoffs. You know what I mean? Right. So it's I don't think we're there yet, because there's enough. Winning still matters, and it's still like that. It does determine the bulk of the discussion of where you end up if you make the playoffs or not.
Yeah. I think we also have to get used to the idea that there's not going to be any more undefeated national championships.
Yeah.
I think everyone's going to have a loss somewhere in there.
Yeah.
It's just the way things are now, especially with the portal, and talent's just going to even itself out. Do you remember? I remember it might have been 15 years ago, Georgia had 3 or 4 of the best, say 10 quarterbacks all on the team at the same time. Like Justin Fields was behind Fromm, who was behind Eason, or I don't know. It was just like a whole list of quarterbacks who ended up going and starting all over the place. And I kept thinking, that guy was on Georgia too. That guy was on Georgia too. It's like, how many guys could they stack into one room? I don't think that's ever going to happen again.
No, Florida had at one time too, because I think it was Cam Newton and Tebow and someone else that was they were all in the same room.
I just don't think that's just not going to be a thing anymore. No. They're all going to find their way to a starting position somewhere. Now, it doesn't mean that players can develop somewhere else and then arrive at one of the big schools. Like, I think all roads lead back to the power schools with the most resources anyways. But at least I don't think the days of 5-star recruits sitting behind another 5-star, I think, are over. They're going to go find a place to start.
For a lot of them. QBs, I think you can make a case where freshmen could still sit behind someone and would be okay with it and start the next year as a redshirt freshman. But but yeah, for the most part, a lot of them are looking to make money and play earlier is really changed.
Yeah, Manning's a bit of a throwback that he sat behind Ewers the way he did. Anyways, all right. Well, I mean, I don't know. Notre Dame's schedule could be tough. It could be not that tough at all. We'll have to wait and see.
But overall, our take is that it's pretty good. Like, it's not. I don't think it's as weak as it has been in the past.
Yeah, I think I'll reserve judgment. I think if I was going to bet, I'd bet there's at least one playoff team on that schedule. But I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out by the end of the year, none of those teams are ranked. I could also see that happening.
Yeah. Okay.
So we'll see. Anyways, I think there's a good place to leave it.
Yep.
So for Jeff Dover, I'm Jon Barban, and that's your Saturday versus Sunday podcast.